Hey developers, today we're going to look at nest.js. I'm going to tell you why you may be interested in checking it out as your next backend framework and some things that I really like about it and maybe some things I don't love about it. Hey, and if you're new to this channel, my name is Eric. I'm a full stack software developer. I'm also a big fan of Vue, React, Angular. If you guys are interested in those type of topics, make sure you click that subscribe button. So I have a Nest app here. So what I want to do today is I'm just going to kind of jump into Nest. We're going to talk about it a little bit and we're going to create a basic application. If you haven't seen, I've already did a video on Express and Fast.js, and I thought it'd be interesting to see another backend framework and how efficient it is. So you can see here, it says Hello Nest, a progressive node.js framework for building efficient, reliable, and scalable server-side apps. So before we get too far into this, let's have a quick word from our sponsor. This week's video is sponsored by Career Karma. Career Karma is the best place to find job training programs online. So here's the deal. Boot camps are a really great way to break into a career in tech that can get you a six-figure salary and high job satisfaction. There's no doubt about that. Career Karma aggregates top boot camps by category so you can easily find the best. In fact, Career Karma has helped over 1 million workers navigate their careers each month through an amazing community of peers, mentors, and coaches. They even have nightly live audio rooms in their app hosted by people like me. If you're interested in tech, you should 100% be on Career Karma. Career Karma is free and always will be, so click the link in the description to sign up now. And just for you, the first 1,000 of my subscribers will get a free career coaching session to get you going in the right direction. Just click that link below. Thanks. Check out Career Karma. Link is in the description. Thanks. All right. So let's take a look at Nest here. And so if we look at our documentation, it's really built on top of Node.js and Express, and you can also actually work with it on Fastify. So like under the hood, as it says right here, it makes use of the Express framework by default, but if you like, you can use Fastify as well. So for this demo, for this tutorial, I'm just going to use Express. To install it, it has this nest.js CLI that's really simple to get started with, and you can even clone it if you want to use a starter project instead. First thing you need to know before you get into Nest is that it has this philosophy, and you can even kind of take a look at the actual information about it, where they use controllers, they use these things called providers, which are like services, and then they use this module system. So if you take a look at the application here, now if you want to get started, all you need to do, and I'll show you here, just from the official documentation, you need to do it npm tacg nest.js CLI, and then do nest new project name. Now, I already did that before this video started, so I'm not going to bore you with doing that, but that's exactly how you start. And when you start it, you'll get an application that looks like this. You have on the left-hand side, I have this controller spec file. It generates all these files for you out of the box when you create a new app using it. Has this controller, has this modules, it has this service, it has this main TS. So let's go and talk about each one just for a moment. So the main.ts file is the TypeScript file. Let me take a step back. This whole framework is in TypeScript, so if you're a big fan of TypeScript like I am, this is awesome because it has TypeScript out of the box. It's also really meant for people who really like all the cool stuff that classes provides to you. It's a very object-oriented programming way. It has OOP in it, so this is the type of framework that you're getting with Nest. Services are where you kind of do any of your business logic. It's where you're going to be talking to your database. It's basically where you put your more complicated project information in. Anytime you want to have some like complicated logic, you put it inside the server. Modules sort of ties in everything together. We're going to get back to this, but essentially anytime you create a new controller, or if you create a new service, you have to declare it inside this module here. And don't worry if this looks a little scary. You can actually use the CLI. It has this generation capability, so you can generate your controllers and services, and it'll automatically import it into this module. And then it has this controller, and controller is almost like the router of the app for the backend app. So this tells it where you want different routes to go. So if you want to route to /hello or just to default, this router does it, or this controller does it. And you can also create multiple controllers. So you're not just stuck with one. You can create as many as you want. They'll all be inside this controller here. You'll have them all listed in this array, and then you can have different routes inside of them. And there's a lot more to Nest, but I just wanted to go over some of these basic examples. You can also see a lot of great information if you look inside here where it tells you like their ideas of providers, services, and why you want to use a service. Now, if you have been listening and watching for a while and you're familiar with Angular, you're going to be really at home with Nest. I think there is a really big connection between the Nest framework and the Angular community because they both have these controllers. They both have, well, they don't have both controllers. They both have services. They both have this OOP style. We're using these things right here with this @ sign. This is a decorator. But even if you've never used Angular, I still think this is an excellent framework to use. I think it's pretty simple to get started with. And the only thing that you may want to be cautious about if you don't have any TypeScript experience, it could be a little intimidating because it is really TypeScript heavy. You can kind of get away without using types at all, but I think you lose a lot of power of this framework if you're not using types, so it doesn't make much sense to me. So let's take a look at a few examples of getting started. And like I said, there's a lot of other things in this framework I'm not going to cover in this tutorial. Like they have pipes, they have interceptors, which are like ways to kind of intercept messages. And they also have all these recipes and services. Like I started with a REST API, but if you wanted to, you can have a GraphQL API. And when you use the CLI to install, it asks you, do you want a REST or do you want a GraphQL? It also has a whole bunch of authentication, authorization stuff. If you wanted to create something that you were gonna like a login page and you want to only have certain people authorized to go to certain routes, you can do that. Well, you can use this with a login page, that is. It also has WebSockets, has microservices, and something we'll talk about a little bit later, it has this really cool connection with Swagger. So you can get Swagger up and running and you can test all your API endpoints, and it has deep integration with it, which is so much they even put it in their documentation. And it even has these recipes. So if you're using Postgres, TypeORM, Mongoose, you can follow these styles to get up and running on your app. But today we're not going to do that. We're just going to keep our app really simple. And I'm going to turn off my camera so you can see the full screen here. Cool. So this is what comes out of the box. And you get this get decorator, and it just labels this get hello. So what this is saying is this controller, remember this is like a router. This is saying this is the root of our back end. We're saying anytime you do a get request, remember those HTTP verbs, get, post, delete, put, patch. Those are all set as decorators. And then you have a name here, and this name can be whatever you want to call it. Usually you want to call it something similar to what you're returning. And then you can have the return type here and then what it's returning. So if we go to our app here and look at localhost 3000, see we have our hello world. So we know that it's working correctly. But let's say we wanted to change things around a little bit. First, we can even change the controller path. So once if we wanted everything with /blah at the end. So if we do that and refresh, oh, now we're getting a cannot found. But if we change it to /blah, now it's working again. We can even take each individual GET request and put an endpoint in here. So this could be GET/hi. I know these aren't the greatest names for routes. So now our blah gets an error, but if we put hi, now it's working again. So first, that's how you can basically do multiple different routes here. So the second thing I want to show you is what if we wanted to change like the status code that's being returned here. We can do that too, but actually before we do that, let's see if we wanted to do a param. So a kind of common scenario is if you want to put like localhost 3000 and then put /5, and that would retrieve something. So we can do that too. And the easiest way to do that, I'm going to delete these in here. And we're going to delete this. And instead of having get hello here, I'm going to put in something called @param. And this is another decorator that you can add inside here. We're going to have it called ID. And then, well, it's going to be basically an ID is the name on the param, and it's going to be type string. It's basically coming from the back end. Instead of returning this app service, which I'll get in a moment, I could just return back the same ID if I wanted to. So let's see if that works. Now you can see as I type param in, it automatically added it into my imports. If it ever doesn't, you can do control, I think it's control dot in Windows, or I think it's commands dot on the Mac, and it'll give you an option to add it already if it's not already in there. So I already saved it. And by the way, I am running this server. To start the server, if you I didn't mention this, but you can just type in npm run start:dev, and that'll go ahead and start your nest.js server after you do the npm, basically nest.js create to create the app. And then right here in this Git, we're going to have to add in ID. And this basically tells us it's going to be like a dynamic ID, a param that's going to be passed in through the route. And if I save it and I refresh it, cool. Now we see 5 here. So if I put in, I don't know, a whole big number or whatever I want, now it's actually showing the param and displaying it to us. So this is kind of interesting, but it doesn't do too much. So what I want to do next is create something a little bit more interesting. You can see right here we have this app service. So this app service is really used for anytime we have any sort of logic, we're grabbing database, we kind of grab it from our services. And this service can be shared between all our different controllers. So I'm going to go into our app service. I'm going to make this a little bit more interesting. I kind of want to add in a few things. And I guess the first one is I need to grab some like information on the, basically has some information that I can use and retrieve and to show to users. So I'm going to delete this get hello. And I certainly could create a whole new app service if I wanted to. I can create multiple services through the Nest CLI. I can Nest G for generate and then create it. But for right now, let's just add in my own data here. So I'm going to create a read-only. I'm going to create some albums. And I'm going to create, I'm going to do any for now, but we'll add in a interface later. Basically we'll add in a way to track our albums later. And then right here, we're going to do an ID1. I'm going to name, I don't know, the Black Album and artist Metallica. And then the next one, I guess I'm going to have ID2, name Red, and this will be artist Taylor Swift. And cool, so now I have this read-only albums. But I want to be able to like return back all the information on it. So I'm going to create something called find all. And once again, I'm going to do this any for now. And this is going to return this dot albums. So now let's see if we can get this service that we created to work with our controller. So instead of get hello, I'm just going to call it, I guess I'm going to call it find. Yeah, that'll probably find all. I'll just call it the same name. It doesn't have to be the same name. So I'll come back to here. Let's just copy and paste this. And I'm going to do another one. And I'm assuming if you don't have anything here, this is going to be a find all. And this find all, I'm not going to have any parameters. It's just going to send everything to us. And I'm going to do type any again, and I'll add some types here in a moment, but I want to return this .appService.findAll. So let's see if that works. So now I've added in something that returns all this data in our service. So let's say here I don't have any parameters. Cool, so it returned back a JSON object with our Metallica and our Taylor Swift. Cool, so what happens if we wanted to just return one, not all of them? So we can go back into our app service and we can create something, I don't know, called find one. And the idea of this one is that it just returns the first one that with the ID that matches. So now I'm going to have an ID, or we're going to have an, we'll assume that it comes in as a number. Once again, we'll type any, and we'll return this.albums.find album, and we'll do an arrow function here. And album.id equals ID. So this should just return using the albums. It'll do a return of just the ID that's passed in. So to do this, let's use this get hello, but let's just do find one. We're going to delete this name here, call it find one. It still have a param and it's still coming over as a string. But we can return, and we'll have it return instead of a string. We'll have it return an any. And we should be able to do this, but we don't have get hello anyways. We do have find one, and we need to have the ID sent over. So I'm actually going to typecast it as a number, and you can do that using this number right here in JavaScript. And now I should be able to use the number passed in here, should be able to find individual albums. So once again, I'm still using get requests. Now if I come over here and put in /2, cool, so it seems like it's working. It found Taylor Swift. And if I go /1, it found Metallica. That's great. So now we've created a very simple API that grabs data and returns it. And it automatically, it's smart enough to know this is JSON, so it's returning it as JSON. And that seems to be working. But one really cool thing about Nest is if you look here, it has something called Open API. So if I kind of make this a little smaller, it has this Open API, which allows us to use Swagger. And now we can use Swagger to kind of annotate our APIs, but also as I test post, if I test any posts, instead of using something like Postman or curl, I can use Swagger to do it. So I'm going to come back here once again, open up my console, I'm going to clear it, and I'm going to just do a quick install of this. And I'm going to do this, but without the $sign at the end. And so this will just take a moment and it should install. All right, so it went ahead and installed, and there's a few other setup things that we need to do. We need to go into our main.ts file and copy some stuff over. So I'm going to do that real quickly. And I'm going to main ts, and it looks like I need to add in this const config in this document. And let's just see if we can add that all in here. And remember, see these squiggly lines? I can do control dot, and I can do add all missing imports. And it just goes ahead and adds it all in for me, which is really cool. And I think that's it that I need to add in here. And we'll see if it works. So right now, it's basically, it adds a tag called cats. So I guess we can call this, I don't know, albums, because we don't want cats. And we need to change this to album API description. And we can even add like album, I guess this would be a title, album description. And so yeah, that's good. And it's going to just be on the API, the setup. So it's going to be the API route, and I'll show you how that works. So if this works, I should be able to run this. And by the way, this is npm run start : dev. That should start it up. And there's a whole bunch of other documentation here if you want to change the document builder or change things. But let's see if this works. Okay, so it said it started. So instead of going to /1, I'm going to go to /API. Cool. So here is our API Swagger document. And if you don't know anything about Swagger, one nice thing about Swagger is you can test your APIs inside of it. So here's our Git. We have no descriptions. It's not very helpful right now, but we can at least try it out and click execute. And we can see here is the content. It tells us it's already set the content type to application JSON. And it's doing a lot of stuff for us. We can even try the Git one here. I could try it out. I can pass in a number too. And it did return it back as we expected. So now we have our fully functioning Swagger document, but we want to make it a little bit better. So you remember I created this service here, and I didn't have any like types or anything in here. So it might have been kind of weird. We have this find all and find one, and they don't have any types, and also this albums doesn't have a type. So let's create those types to do that. And kind of the convention inside Nest is to create two folders. One is going to be our entities, and we'll talk about entities in a second. And one is to create a folder called, we use this folder. We'll make sure we put it in the root. And the second folder we'll call DTOs. And DTOs is where we're going to put our data transfer objects. And our data transfer objects, I'll explain here in a second what those are. And usually, actually, we call it DTO without the S at the end is kind of the convention I've seen. Cool. So in our entities here, these are going to be our interfaces. They're going to be anything that helps us describe the type of our, basically any of our types we'll put in these entities folder. And by convention, you'll put it in like this, album.entity.ts. And then what we want to do here is we export a class called album. And then we would put some properties in there, like we want a number. You can see there before we had numbers. We had a name, which is string. And then we also have an artist, which is string. Okay, so I have our album interface here. And so the next thing we need to do is add this album interface to some of our to our app here. So the best way to do that, we'll go into our services, and in our services we have album. Instead of albums, we're going to put in this new interface, which we called album with an array, and we'll have to add it in there. So we'll just add album. So now we have this album interface in here, and then for find all, we're going to return an album. And this for find one, we're just going to return one album. So now we have some more interfaces in here. But if you go back to our title here, we're still missing like some information here on what these do. So since we're adding in the Swagger document, we have access to this new API properties, which allows us to see more information here. So if I do, so in this interface, well, actually, I'm sorry, I made it an interface, should be a class. And by the way, the reason we set it as a class and not an interface is because it actually, the nest.js documentation tells you should probably use classes, because when you TypeScript compiles down, it gets rid of interfaces, but it keeps classes. So we can do this new decorator here, and we're going to call it @API property. And we're going to add it to these three. And this will basically allow you to add API properties that'll show into your document. But what we really want to do is maybe we should try to create a data transfer object. So we want to do a post so you can add things to this. So let's create the DTO first. So I'm going to create one called create.album.dto and DTS. And you're probably asking, what is a DTO? So if you come from like a Java background or a background like in C#, you have these things called DTOs, or which are data transfer objects, and they're a way to describe data for your app to understand what it is. And it's kind of similar in some ways to our class that we just created, but it basically tells Nest what this object's going to look like and how it should return it to you. So I'm going to export class create album DTO, and we're going to have a few things here. So I'm going to have a name, just string, an artist, which is also a string, and then I want to also add this API description, API property. And before I didn't really add anything to this, so it wasn't that helpful, but you can add a bunch of things to this. So like I can add a description, name of artist, and then I can also put like type, and this will be a string. And cool. And it didn't automatically add the API properties, so I have to add it in. And there's a whole bunch of these API things to add more documentation to your Nest. And now I have this create album. So let's go back to our service, and we'll need to create some way to add something, a way to create something in our back end. So we're going to create, and it's going to be basically an album. So we're going to pass in like an album, and it's going to be this create album DTO, and it's going to return back an album that it just created. So I can do it a couple of ways. I'm going to do a const new album, and we're going to just create an ID. We're going to just create it from date.now. And then we're going to take everything. We're going to basically use our spread operator to grab the album information. And then we're going to take the albums, and we're going to push the new album on it. And then we're going to return new album, the one we just created. So we did that right. Now we have this new app service that has this create. And now we can add it to our controller. And by the way, never fix these, so this needs to be fixed. So we'll have find one. It returns a album, which we'll do like this. And this find all returns the album array. So now we can do one more. And this time we're going to use the post. Now post is using this new decorator, and we're going to call it, by the way, I want to add another thing here on top of here. There's this thing called API tags. We'll just add in so that way this is the correct tag for this controller. And if we go back here and refresh it, album description looks very similar, but we'll keep going. We should be able to get some things in here. Also, we can sort of do these responses here, like this OK response. This is, once again, anything with API is just for the Swagger document. So we can say, oh, it requires albums and isArray equals true. Album. And if I do that, it should work. But let's add in this post. So I'm gonna have this post here, and it's gonna be a create. We'll make async create. And now we're going to use this body parser, just kind of like you use in Express. It's a way to define like what's going to be returned back, what it requires, actually, what it's assuming that's going to be sent to it. And we're going to use this create album DTO, and that's of type create album DTO. And it's not, we're not going to use a promise here. And now we can return this .app service, and we created that new crate, and we'll pass in the create album DTO. We can do this. We can do API response, and then we're gonna say status 201, and we're gonna have a description here that says the record was created. Oops, I actually made one mistake. I need to switch this add tag right here, because it can't have the same, it's getting confused because the different tag names actually named the same tag here. So if I do that and refresh it, cool. So now I have my post right here, and I could try the post down. By the way, you can see here, I have schemas down here, and these different schemas are because I added in the different album and put all the different requests in here. And also inside here, this app controller, I'm assuming that the post will do a 201 so let's see if this all works. I'm going to try it out, and I just need to put in a string here. So I need to kind of put in something myself. So I'll put in, this is a JSON, I'll call it I don't know, blue. If I hit execute, so it went ahead and added in a name and an ID with a blue. So if I do get for everything and try it out and execute, cool. So now I have my new blue one in here. Has just some crazy ID and a name. But actually, I didn't add artists. I guess I could add an artist in. In my DTO here, I didn't mark all of them API descriptions. I only did the first one. So I did the first one for the name. So I guess I could do the same thing for the next one. So this would be, instead of the description here, name of artist, I'll put, yeah, so this should be the artist name, and this should be the album name. Let's see if that makes more sense. I'm gonna save it here, come back here, refresh it. Cool, so now it says I need a name and artist, so that makes more sense. So let's try it out. I'm gonna put the name of the artist, I don't know, Taylor Swift, and the well, actually, the name of the album, I guess this would be Evermore. And then the artist name would be Taylor Swift. We'll just do Taylor Swift. We'll execute. Cool. So now we have the name, ID. Everything seems to be working here. Perfect. Awesome. Now, I've just kind of scratched the surface on everything you can do here. We can certainly, if you wanted to, you can change. Like this one is returning, this post is returning a 201. But what happens if we wanted to return something else, like a 204 or 200 or something? Well, we can do that too. So by default, the crate returns a 201. So if we go to the controller again, the app controller, this API response, we can actually just add in like an HTTP code. Let's say we want to change it to 204. And it automatically added a HTTP code in here from our nest.js common. So now it's going to return a 204, and instead of sending an API response, we can send, I don't know, API no content response. And if you're familiar, if you're not sure which ones there are, there's a ton of responses. If you go to operations, you can kind of see them all. API OK response. This is the Swagger responses. And then if you want to see what other responses, you can go to, I believe it's under overview, exception filters. You can see all the different exceptions, like all the different types. You can throw these if you wanted to. Or you can just kind of set your own by using HTTP code. So I can do API no content response. And this will be type album. And then we can also, if we wanted to, we can also have different responses. We can also add, I don't know, API bad request response. But now since I changed it, and I'll come back to our Swagger document, refresh it. Now we have a 204 and a 502. So if there's some sort of error, then it'll do it. So if we try it out, and I don't know, we don't send over anything. Let's see if we send like a bad response. It won't even let us send. Let's see if we just an empty response here. Then we, well, right now we don't have any checks in place, so it just returns back the normal response. But we could have thrown an error at this point if we wanted to. But let's say we add so it basically did a 204 response back to us. But we could say if the create album DTO equals, like if you want to have it empty, like I don't know, you could do dot artist equals nothing, or you can do not. Maybe we could just do not dot artist. Then we can throw an exception. So we can throw new. And then this is where we can use one of these exceptions that you see in here. So I don't know, bad request exception. Let's try that. Throw new bad request exception. So if we did that right, okay, seems like it all imported in right. So now it says if you don't have the artist, it should throw this bad request exception. If I go back to the Swagger document and I try it out, and I don't know, I have nothing in this artist here, so it's empty. See here, and I execute it. Now I get error 400, bad request. So it returns it back as I expected. Cool. All right, so that's all I have today. Check out this Nest.js. I actually have some other videos that I recommend if you're trying to learn Nest that goes into a lot further. So go ahead and check out these videos. Thanks.